with things such as the internet existing, whenever a hateful comment is made online, you just have to take it with a grain of salt. But what do you do when a hate-filled manifesto is uploaded online and it leads to violent action? 19 minutes after the first call was made to the authorities about a mass shooting in El Paso, Texas at a Walmart, a hate-filled manifesto was uploaded online, and 22 people died and 24 people were injured as a result of it. So what do you do when hateful speech leads to action? It could cause legal questions. Has anyone ever said anything hateful to you online before? Should the government place legal ramifications on hate speech? Today I will be informing you about the controversies of hate speech and what the liberals have to say about it and what the conservatives have to say about it. So to understand hate speech, the first thing you have to do is have a good understanding of what hate speech is. And so the definition that I found on the legal website is hate speech is a term of art and legal, political theory that is used to refer to verbal conduct and other symbolic communicative action which willfully expresses intense antipathy towards a similar group or an individual of a basic membership of the same group, where the groups in question are usually those distinguished by ethnicity, religion, or sex. So hate speech has many labels. It could be racism, sexism, classism, speech against your sexual preference. And so it's existed for a long time, as there have always been hateful comments made about people's race, religion, and whatnot. And so it's existed long before the Constitution. So it's really kind of hard to regulate since it's even older than the Constitution is itself. And so that leads to question whether or not the government should take legal action on this topic. So people handle hate speech differently. People have taken violent action or political action to try and combat hate speech. And so that leads to the question whether or not there should be laws, because there's just different ways to handle it. And so hate speech can lead to violent action. As stated before, there has been several comments made online about certain groups, and then shortly after mass shootings have occurred. So it leads to the question whether or not we should continue to allow hateful things to be said about certain groups on the internet. So regulating it would be hard for the government because you'd have to classify what exactly is hate speech, or what could just be somebody just saying something jokingly or offensive, or you have to there are many nuances that would be a problem for the government to actually have to be able to clarify what is hate speech and how to regulate it. So the liberals are actually in favor of there being hate speech laws because they believe in equality for everybody and don't believe that anybody should have anything offensive said about them. So one fact that I have is the U.S. Supreme Court has already declared that the right of free speech is not absolute. In a 1942 decision, Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire, the court ruled that the First Amendment does not protect against fighting words. Now, this is huge because people like to believe that the First Amendment is absolute and say, well, I have the right to free speech. However, this says that fighting words are not allowed. So words that are violent can be regulated against, and if they lead to violent action, then that is illegal and you're not allowed to say that. Therefore, free speech is not absolute, which means if they wanted to, they could potentially strict and enforce laws against hate speech. So after certain hate rants, violence has ensued. So although it wasn't necessarily violent words, it was hateful words which have led to violent action. Therefore, it's possible to actually regulate what can and cannot be said by the government. So another thing about hate speech is hate speech leads to emotional damage, and an author said hate speech therefore prevents people from taking part fully in society, and society suffers as a result. So that means whenever somebody says something hateful, people say sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That is not always true. Whenever a hateful comment is made against you, you will probably have emotional damage from it, and you can tend to remember it. And so when something is made about a certain race or a certain ethnicity or a certain sexual preference in society that is against what you are, you're going to feel like you won't belong in society. Therefore, you will not want to partake in whatever you are. For instance, if someone calls you the N-word, you will not be proud to be a black person at that moment. Another thing is that the First Amendment is over 200 years old, which means that it was written at a time when the internet was not conceived. And so it's interesting to take note that with the internet going on, the founding fathers would have had no idea on how to even handle something such as the internet, where hate speech is being made all the time. It's just an old amendment that needs to be updated because the freedom of speech was made in a time that was much simpler and people were not abusing their freedom of speech. However, the main argument against the amendment The First Amendment is what conservatives like to use. So conservatives, they believe that no matter what is said, all speech should be legal. And so one quote I have is, "The First Amendment protects the right to free speech, no matter how much someone may not like what is being said." And so conservatives are not always racist or sexist or any of these things. They just believe that none of their rights to free speech should be tampered with, as America is one of the few countries that has freedom of speech, and they can say whatever they want to say without the government banning what they're saying. So there's another quote that I had that says, "America's culture, free speech, and the First Amendment that protects it are an incredible blessing that have been passed down for and fostered for generations of self-governing people." This just means it's a blessing that we are able to say what we want to say online, no matter if it is offensive, because it's just a gift that not everybody has. And so emotional response varies to certain things that are said against hateful speech. And so the issue with that is you can't regulate if one person responds differently to one comment in comparison to another. So one person might react differently to a racist comment and not be as affected as someone else might be. So that's another reason why regulating it would be difficult. There's also social ramifications for hate speech. So people have actually been fired for saying a racist or sexist comment. So conservatives are aware of this. So even though there are not legal ramifications, there are social ramifications. People have been fired for making all kinds of offensive comments. Therefore, they feel like there shouldn't be ramification. So with that being said, hate speech is essentially any speech that is hateful towards a specific group of people. It is permissible in the U.S. currently. However, liberals believe that it should not be, and conservatives believe that it should be. But now that I've presented you with all the facts, how would you respond to hate speech? What do you think? What is your opinion on it?